Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mandisa and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And on today's episode, we are continuing with our series titled My Career Stories, where we are interviewing a number of women from different backgrounds, talking to them about their career journeys, their milestones that they've achieved, some challenges that they've had to overcome, and how it is that they got to where they are today. And on today's episode, I have an amazing, trailblazing, well-accomplished woman in studio with me. Her name is Mandisa Mathobela, and she is the Country Partnerships Manager for Unicef, formerly a Head of Stakeholder Relations for one of the country's leading financial institutions. She is an Eisenhower Fellow, a Fulbright Scholar, and so much more. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Thank you so much, Mbali, and thank you for your glowing introduction. I was not expecting that at all.
I had to. We need to put it out there so that the audience knows who I'm talking to.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here. I mean, you've had a very interesting, inspiring, and colorful career so far. And today's episode is really just about unpacking that and just taking us through what the journey has been like. So I want us to actually dial it back to go to the beginning. So who is Mandisa, and how was your childhood like? How were you raised, and how has it really informed the women that we see today?
I was nodding when you said colorful, because I think that's the only way that I can describe my story. It's such an eclectic mix of so many different things. But I grew up in Pietermaritzburg, born and bred. My whole family is out there. We have the mothership in KZN, and then we run satellite locations out of Gauteng. So that's how the family is positioned. But I grew up in a very strong sort of female-led household. And that was kind of a theme across a number of the families, or the micro-families within our broader family structure. And so it was always a very matriarchal family. And you'll find that a lot of the women have very strong personalities, and so it was a very safe space to grow up as a little girl. It was very affirming, it was very supportive, and there was nothing you couldn't do. I think that was the one thing I remember distinctly about, I always kind of remember about my childhood, is that it was always positioned as limitless. Our parents, obviously, like many other parents, had come out of the worst of apartheid, and they just kind of said, you know, if we did it, you guys can do it. If we survived this, you can do it. And I think it was great to have that sort of very nurturing, very encouraging environment. And you know, to a degree, I think, you know, a little bit pushy as well. There was, you know, an expectation that you have gotten an opportunity to access the kind of education and the kind of opportunities that many people in our family hadn't been able to access before, and you needed to do something with that. You know, you really needed to show up for those opportunities, and so I really appreciated that, and just kind of always growing up with the sense that as a woman in this world, there absolutely isn't a reason for you to not be able to go out there and sort of make something of yourself and build a career and a life for yourself that you can be proud of. And so that was just kind of like a mantra, unsaid mantra, in our household. Our brothers are all also very supportive, but in many instances, you know, are also a lot more consultative than I think is culturally believed to be true, of Zulu families in particular. So we play up to all the stereotypes, and we love it. But it's also like it was a really safe place to be a woman growing up, and a girl child in the household. And I think it's something that we've kind of always wanted to carry through to the next generation as well.
And how do you think that has just informed who you are today, and also just your, you know, perspective about the world we live in?
So I recognize my mom as one of my biggest sort of role models because she has been such a formative person in my development. Everything she's kind of sowed in us, we sort of see the fruit of, and the produce of, and so that's something that I'm extremely grateful for. My mom is a career nurse, and so she's kind of been in the system the last 45 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's a long time.
She's retired 3 times in the last 5 years, so I don't know if she actually wants to stop.
Yeah.
But having seen someone really push beyond the boundaries of what's ordinary in their own career and in their own life has been something that we really have appreciated. My sister and I, my mom left the public sector, which is very unlike your traditional sort of 1970s nurse, and she went out into the private sector. She did occupational health for a couple of years. When I was in high school, I think my sister was in primary school. She took up an opportunity in the UK. So she put me in boarding school and my sister with my aunt for a couple of years to pursue that. And that was also, I mean, for a single parent to sort of put their kids, in boarding school and go off to a foreign country was just like a little bit kind of, risque.
Yes.
And so she did it, and we watched her pursue her dreams right in front of us. And so that also is something that, by the time I decided to then go and study abroad, it was like, well, I mean, you just
standard,
did it. Right? It's been less than 10 years since you came back.
Standard,
so, I think it's really raised the bar, and also just kind of helped to position ourselves in the world as people who have a responsibility.
Sure.
I think that's something that resonates a lot for me. I love running into my mom's patients, like everyone has a story or an anecdote about, oh, your mom is, such and such, and this is what she's done and this is how she's helped me. She would have patients literally sort of queuing outside her door. In the public system, the queues are quite significant. So, she would have people literally saying, "Oh no, go in. I'm waiting for
specifically your mom." Yeah,
exactly. She'd have patients kind of like bringing her produce from their gardens just because they genuinely appreciated. The kind of care that she provided them with, and she's always been someone who really sees people, regardless of sort of social standing or status, and that's something that I've always admired about her. And I think my sister and I naturally have always wanted to take that into our own lives, and be very human, very present, very real people, regardless of kind of where we come from and where the people that we get to interact with come from, but just be able to really meet them at a very human place.
And I think they are.
From a corporate point of view, it's a worldview that I find for some people to be very different, and we don't all have that similar appreciation and understanding. But I wouldn't do it any other way. I think to see people as real people is perhaps the first and most important thing about being able to work and achieve anything with people. And so that's something that has been a thread throughout our life story.
Amazing. And I think in just the seeing people for who they are, that's where also you're able to form those authentic connections, and an authentic understanding also of just their being and what support they could potentially need. So going back to then, your time now in university, it's time for you to decide what it is that you want to study. How did you decide what you wanted to study? What was that process like and that time in your life like?
I spent probably the better part of my childhood absolutely convinced of the fact that I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
In hindsight, we're not necessarily sure whose dream this was anymore, mine or my mom's. And I think that resonates probably with a lot of, children that sort of grew up in the 90s as well. When being a doctor was kind of seen as like the career to sort of grow into. So I wanted to be a pediatrician for like the longest time. And I think it was only up until sort of maybe grade 11 physics that I was like, I don't know about this anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, this is not going the way that I thought it would.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started thinking about what I really enjoyed and what I liked doing and the kind of spaces that inspired me and the work that I wanted to do. And I think I really only came to the party of sort of thinking about what am I supposed to do a couple of months before we were supposed to apply, because pretty much up until then I was going to med school. And so it was obviously devastating for everyone that I didn't go to med school. But I'm so grateful that I didn't in so many ways. There are days, I mean, I wonder, if I, had turned out to be, someone different, what would I have done? But honestly, I think appreciating the fact that, that fork in the road came just in time is one of the things that I'm always grateful for. So when I finally realized that you're not great with blood and the possibility that you'll survive kind of coming through this whole process of stitching people up and like
very
working with, and because my mom was a nurse, like we ran a little sort of, support clinic from our house, low key, right? So I thought I had it on lockdown. I didn't have it on lockdown.
No, you did not.
I really didn't. I maybe could have been a pharmacist, right? I liked the dispensing bit and wanted to understand how all the meds worked and what they did. But I definitely wasn't going to be a great doctor. So fortunately, I had this epiphany in grade 11, and so then had to start thinking about, geez, what else is out there? I've never wanted to be anything else. I wanted to be a CA for 2 minutes after the CA came and spoke to us and said she bought a BMW and she was 32, and I was like, yes, that's the one.
That's me.
And then I was like, also no. You just never even liked grade 9 accounting. There's no way you're going to survive
at a university level.
So when sobriety finally settled, it was literally application season, and I was going through kind of all of the university materials that they send you, and I came across some material from WITS that was talking about global politics and diplomacy, and something in me was like, okay, I think you could do that. I think, I'd done sort of debating throughout high school, and I had always engaged in sort of public affairs and current affairs, and I thought, as long as it doesn't get too political, I think I could probably do this. And so a family friend of ours was an ambassador, and my mom got me to have a chat with him about, his career and what he did day to day, and it didn't sound depressing. And at this point, I also needed a career.
Of some sort.
My mom still wasn't convinced because it was pretty much still under the BA umbrella. But she was like, if you become an ambassador, that'll be great. And I was like, the only problem is we won't know for like 20 years
before that actually happens.
So she made me take out an insurance policy when I enrolled in varsity, which was, if you are going to do an arts degree, you're going to do it with something else that will likely turn into a career. So I ended up doing a BA law. Which was like, you will be something, teacher, lawyer, doctor, something that has job attached to it. Which was very important because she just had decided that we needed to work. And so I started out doing a BA law, and I was happy to do it. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer, but I really enjoyed law. I tutored in the law faculty for most of my time at WITS. But when it came time to sort of choose between going into honours for international relations and law, I ended up going into honours international relations. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So I think you just touched on a very important point there around maybe the perception around BA type of degrees, Where do you think you are personally with that mindset, in that, if you potentially do a BA degree, you might not, be employable versus your experience? So what's your perception around that?
When I was at WITS, there was this like rolling joke on campus that used to keep me up at night, and it was, what's the difference between a BA degree and a pizza?
What's the difference?
A pizza can feed 4 people.
Hectic.
So I was freaking out
that you wouldn't find a job
like,
after
oh my
school.
gosh, this is gonna be a disaster.
Yeah,
But I loved what I was doing. So I was deeply conflicted. I was like, I really want a job, but I also really, really am enjoying all of my courses. And I mean, I went rogue. I did German, I did econ, I did international relations, and then I did law, and then at some point I took some human rights courses, and then I did German. I literally was the typical kind of BA student. Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I didn't delve deeply into was politics, because my mom was like, I do not want any of that political drama, resurfacing in this house. And so in hindsight, I probably should have just taken politics and, had a good old time with it. But, I honored my mom, and I found some other interesting things to do on the side. But it was it was a really, really heavy perception that, was prevalent on campus, was like, not only like a joke, haha, but also a reality for a lot of people, because when it came to like sort of honors or VAC work, all of your CA friends were like in it to win it. Like they were being called by Tutuga, they were being placed at EY, they were already planning their corner offices at PwC, and I was just like, man, I wonder if I'm gonna get a job. So it didn't help that I was in a res that was mostly sort of law. It was sort of law, commerce and management, right? Yes. I don't know how we got in there. Like they snuck in like probably 4 BA students in like the whole res. And so everyone was going to VAC work. Everyone was interviewing for a job. Everyone had an internship by the time we left. And I just thought, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
But I think in hindsight, I'm so grateful I did it, because what we don't realize about the way that the South African system is designed is that we're designed to have careers from grade 9. It's like you will take accounting, and then you will take it all the way to grade 12, and then you will go to university, and you will take it again for another 4 years, and then you will, finish, and then you will do articles, and then you will do CTA, and then, 15 years later, thank God you're an accountant, but it's a very tunneling system, right? We don't allow people to do a master's degree in anything they don't have an honors or an undergraduate degree in, unless you really motivate. And so when I got to study in the US, it just kind of shifted my whole perspective. There were people who were in our master's program who had undergraduate degrees that were completely different
to what they were studying,
to what they had studied before.
And
it helped me, and it also challenged me, because one of the reasons I ended up changing my master's focus is because I just thought, I don't want to do this again. I've done it for 4 years, and now I'm doing it with people who just started out. So I got to then do a master's in international trade and investment, which I absolutely, loved. The statistics almost killed me, but I'm here, praise God. So it's that perception for me that we have to decide so early in order to be successful, that I think we need to change a little bit. And there's incredibly valuable skills that people in BA degrees are learning.
Definitely.
The ability to write and think and argue.
Think critically.
Is so undervalued and underrated. And when the difference between having it and not having it, I think, is also just kind of transformative from a career point of view. So after I came back from the US, I kind of lost my BA complex a little bit, because then I was like, man, nobody has, 7 years of this experience, coming straight out of university. So that helped me. But I think if I, talking to BA graduates today, I'm always like, use it as a launch pad. Learn the skills, network, be teachable, but don't just see yourself kind of as an arts major for the rest of your life. You can literally go on to do pretty much anything. Just because our economy isn't very good at reflecting that back, it doesn't mean that it's not possible.
It's not possible.
And so I think breaking that stereotype about what people, tunneling people into a particular path or creating a perception about particular types of qualifications is a little bit of what we need to challenge in South Africa.
Sure. That's so powerful. So now you've come back from the US and you have navigated your complex, as you mentioned it. how are you then positioning yourself in the job market? How is also the transition from that into your first job?
Yeah, rough. It was all rough. It was a blurry, rough season.
Yeah.
But again, I think one of the things that I was really grateful for is having incredibly intentional career coaching.
Okay.
Throughout the master's program. Like everything from like how you get your elevator pitch right, practicing it with like your peers. I mean, here you are thinking, you've kind of lived a little bit and you've done some stuff, and you literally have sort of a career coach, which was almost compulsory as part of the program, saying, this is how you need to position yourself. These are, this is how you need to reframe your CV. This is how you need to reach out to people and ask for coffees. This is how you, go about, if you're given 5 minutes with this person, what are you going to say about yourself that makes you sellable? And I'm just like, I don't know, stop. But after sort of 2.5 years in that context, you get good at sort of understanding how you do some of that positioning, and it emboldens you, in a way, which is probably the only justification for how I ended up in financial services, because I was never gonna do high corporate traditional. I'm just gonna go out and like save the world and be with but
it's a bit of a full circle considering where you are right now, right?
Well, yes, I guess one could see it that way. So, but one of the things that I did as part of my master's program was actually working for UK Trade and Investment.
Okay.
It was compulsory. You couldn't finish your program unless you'd actually worked somewhere in the field. And I worked with them for about maybe 8 months, I think. Maybe less, kind of really in the program. That's probably when I realized I actually didn't want to be a diplomat anymore, because I was just like, these people are so far from home and they're here all the time. And they don't have rooibos and knickknacks.
They can import it.
It's all just so rough. Yeah, they can, but then it comes on like boxes and it gets delivered at your house. Yeah, you can't go to spa because so it was just all those things where I was like, no, I love South Africa. Like, I love it like I want to be there, love it. Not like I love it like I want to live abroad and talk about how wonderful it is, kind of love it. So that was kind of my main transition. And it only happened because I was actually in the British Embassy and seeing how kind of, people who were expatriates were navigating their lives and navigating their spaces. And I mean, not to say I would never do it, but I think at that time it just kind of said to me, this isn't the season to sort of do this kind of work. And so, but I loved working for trade and investment. And so when I came home, interestingly enough, there was a maternity cover at UK Trade and Investment in South Africa. And so I interviewed for that and I got that because I didn't want to come home to be unemployed.
Of course.
My mom's biggest fear, that she transferred onto the rest of us. So kind of came back into that space. And once I was back in the country, kind of had this opportunity, started looking for another one, because one of the things that I think sometimes people are not very direct about is that it's easier to move from having a job to having another job as opposed to sort of being unemployed and moving into a job. And it's market signaling and a couple of other things that the people who are experts in that area speak about. But even if it's kind of not a long-term opportunity, I mean, I came back with a 6-month contract and I just told myself, at the end of this, you better have a plan, and so that's how it started. So I started chatting to people. I spoke to some recruiters, reached out to some friends of mine, said, hey, I'm back, sent out my CV. They introduced me to some recruiters that they were chatting to. And the long and the short of it is that I then sort of transitioned out of trade and investment into more, traditional financial services. And that's kind of how I ended up in mainstream
insurance,
as it were.
And I mean, you stayed in the financial services industry for quite some time. About 7-8 years?
7-8 years, almost 8 years.
And you moved around in different roles. I want us to actually just talk about your time within that space, because I think that's where the bulk of your corporate experience really comes from. So what was that experience like, and also just navigating the dynamic of being a young Black female in corporate South Africa? What did that look like for you?
So colorful, right? Your initial word, and it was mostly colorful because I never expected. Remember, I wasn't sure I was gonna get a job, right?
Yes.
So the last thing I expected was I was gonna get a job in corporate South Africa,
and to be navigating the complexity of that environment,
right? In a completely different industry, you know. So everything about it for me was just like, oh wow, and good wows, like really good wows. But I was always grateful for having had the opportunity to build wonderful friends in varsity. And I think I would never discredit the value of your network, because the opportunity and the ability to be able to have people around you who have studied different things and have different views is so important. And so I would regularly catch up with my friends who'd been working in insurance for like 5 years and be like, bro, we need to sit down. You need to give me the lay of the land. You need to help me sort of catch up. I want to understand exactly what I'm dealing with so that when I show up, you know, I'm not only just kind of well read in terms of the content and the material that is kind of come across my desk, but that I have a broader understanding of the industry, right? And it's an industry I never anticipated that I would be in. And so having people who have basically spent the last 10 years gearing up to be in those industries was just so valuable. And I think you can never discount that, because in as much as you can become sort of a specialist in your area, there's always opportunities to learn from people around you about the industry, about different skill sets, about how kind of the different components work.
And also, that's how you identify opportunities.
Right?
Exactly.
And so when I started out as an executive assistant, which was also incredibly fortuitous because it was a role that allowed me to learn about the company and the organization. I got to sit in on some sessions that ordinarily, you know, unless you're a senior executive, you're not actually going to sit in, you know. And so that ability to download in real time as a young professional information that it's taken people sort of 15, 20, 25 years to amass, that's invaluable, you know. And no one kind of tells you that sometimes the value of the experience is just being around people who have done it for a really long time. And I had a phenomenal manager when I started out who just kind of took me under his wing and was like, you know, this is our space, this is the industry. If you want to learn and you want to grow, I'm happy for you to do it. But one of the things I also loved about, you know, that workspace was when I kind of asked in my first week, so what are we going to be doing here? You know, he was like, bro, your job is to make my life easier.
That's it.
Well, not so much that, but he was just like, if we, by working together, you know, you can make this easier and I can make it easier for you, then we're going to get on great. And that was just, you know, that was incredibly supportive. And so I spent quite a lot of time with my predecessor. I spent a lot of time with the strategy colleagues that would support our office. And then also just kind of was very deliberate about seeking out feedback, just making sure I was kind of moving in the right direction. And that lasted about a year and a half. And sort of after that, I moved on to my next role, which was a marketing position in our former London office. And that also was a great learning experience because I wasn't a marketer. But then I wasn't really an insurer either. So I had started learning that I could become all of these things that I actually really wasn't. And so one of the reasons why I think my career story has been so colorful is because it's taught me a lot about the power of reinvention. You know, the ability to constantly become something different or to show up in the different areas, as long as you bring your skill set, you bring your work ethic, you bring your attitude, you bring your character. I think that for me has really allowed me to pivot into spaces I ordinarily wouldn't have. And so I did the marketing bit for just under a year and then pivoted again into corporate affairs, initially sort of corporate governance type work, and then finally into stakeholder relations. And because I guess it was closer to international relations and the things that really, really spoke to me, I ended up staying there for pretty much almost the better part of my final years in financial services. And I wouldn't have done it any other way, because whenever you join an organization, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I started out was understand how the business works. You know, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in, sales and distribution, whether you're in IT, whether you're in legal, whether you're in corporate governance, understand how the business works. The most important thing for any business is that it's going to survive and that it's going to be profitable so it can continue to execute all of its other functions. So if you understand how the business works, it changes the way that you approach every other area and aspect of the business. So I was really lucky that when I started out, I started out in retail distribution, and that was fortuitous, simply because that was the heartbeat of the business in many ways. It was also at the time the largest part of the business and almost like the largest profit-making function in the business. And so by virtue of understanding that business, a lot of other things sort of fell into place. And so once you understand the back end and you understand the pressure in the branches and you understand kind of how the products are developed and the products are designed, you can sit with the actuaries, not being an actuary, and sort of have conversations about product design and think about, how does that then influence customer experience? And, how does that then land in the market overall? And how do we make sure that we put in place the legal systems that will cover us, but also make sure that we're compliant with the regulatory frameworks? What are the main complaints that are coming through from the customers? How are we marketing this product and how are we positioning it in the market so that by the time you move over into any other part of the business, that kind of always is your guiding framework. And whenever I chat to people who are kind of going into new organizations or new careers, I'm like, find out how they make their money. That is an invaluable area of understanding, and I think it just changes your approach to everything, because then you sort of stop thinking like a cost center, as it were, and you also think about, how do we make money in this place?
You think
how
like
do
a
we,
business person.
Exactly. How do we make sure that what we're doing is not only sustainable but also profitable? And I think for me that's kind of the full circle appreciation I only got in hindsight. But like you said, colorful.
It is very, very much so. And I think what you're speaking to is just unlocking value, right? Because when you understand where the value is, you're also able to understand how you can position yourself to help create that value. And I don't think a lot of us actually do take time to reflect on what value we bring into the organizations we're in the roles that we're in, and how it ties into the bigger picture. But I want to actually just go to some of the accolades and awards that you have you've gotten throughout your career, right? I mean, in university for your master's, you're a Fulbright scholar, and recently you were an Eisenhower Fellow. I want to talk about that and how that has enhanced your career, or at least positioned you in terms of how you navigated your career, but also from a credibility, visibility, and progression standpoint.
Yeah, it's sometimes when you're talking about all those things, I have to think about,
is that me?
And I guess that's kind of a natural instinct in all of us. But I think for me, the story behind most of that sort of, I guess, maybe as a scholar, or maybe as a learner, student, kind of being in school, I always just enjoyed learning. I really it was my thing. I was a nerd. I wasn't ashamed of my nerd gospel. I kind of, it was just a part of who, a part of who I was. And so I've always been studious, I've always been curious, but never kind of thought that there was anything, I don't know, different about that.
Okay.
Just kind of thought that that's how I was, and that's how some people were. Like, some people are good at sport and some people like other, and so I wouldn't say I was intentional about mining value out of that particular area.
Got you.
Until I probably got to maybe sort of the end of my schooling career.
Okay. This is undergrad.
No, this is end of high school.
Oh, okay.
And I guess it sort of clicked for me when, the university acceptance thing said, for every A you've gotten, you'll get 1,000 Rand off your tuition. And I was like, oh, we can sell this. I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize that we could monetize this. I just thought we were all going through it. And I think it was at that point that it kind of perhaps shifted for me to say, okay, how do I use, my academic inclination in ways that can sort of unlock opportunities that I ordinarily wouldn't have if I just wasn't as invested. And so that's really how the story started. And in the middle of my second year, it was the middle of my second year, I got a random call completely out of the blue when I was in the dining hall from a lady who said she was from the Mellon Mays program, and she had seen my grades on Oracle and she wanted to talk to me, and I was like, I knew they were monitoring our grades. So went in to chat to this lady, and it turned out that she was actually recruiting for students to join this fellowship program. Sure. And this fellowship program was like, would identify students in the arts, interestingly enough. So specifically students who were either in the arts or the sciences at the time. I think the program has subsequently transitioned more to arts, but arts and sciences who had academic potential, who wanted to pursue sort of, higher education, more long-term, sort of into master's and PhD level. And that was absolutely transformative. That for me, when I think about the story, is perhaps even more important than Fulbright, because I would never have done Fulbright if I hadn't done Mellon. But the Mellon program was very intentional about exposing young people to opportunities, helping them to really maximize their academic performance, ensuring that all of us had an academic mentor as part of our undergraduate program. Stuff I would never even have thought about, but has been really, really important in terms of positioning. And so my first trip, probably one of my first trips to the US, was as a Mellon scholar. And we spent the summer at Bowdoin College out in Maine. Sure. Working with other students. American students at Bowdoin College, doing research together over the summer and working on papers, as an undergrad student. And so when I came back from that, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much
world out there.
And so I really enjoyed it, made good friends, and realized how soon people start thinking about masters.
Sure.
Started then understanding, how soon people plan to apply for fellowships. Started seeing, how you think people who write applications get it right the first time. They don't. No. They absolutely. So, the Mellon program was training ground for how do you get your statement of purpose right? How do you, get your GRE score right? How do you start positioning yourself to identify an academic mentor in a university you're not even in yet? The kind of stuff that I just had never thought about. Yeah. So once that thinking shifted for me, applying for Fulbright was obviously just kind of the next step. But I applied for so much other stuff I never got and never heard from. And you know what? I'm completely content with that, because you miss 100% of the opportunities you never put your hand out for.
Application form,
Absolutely. And so the few that I've gotten, I've been really chuffed about, because it's always kind of said, there is something there. There's something that we are still nurturing there. There's something that we're still working on there. But for people who are in kind of the early phases of their career, even mid phases of their careers, sometimes you're just not getting it because you haven't applied.
You haven't applied.
And sometimes it's because you don't think that you're special enough to. And I honestly don't think that this shift would have happened for me if Alison hadn't gone out and called me that day to say, hey, I found your grades on Oracle. So I'm also very intentional about calling talent out of people. Because I think sometimes it's there, but you just don't see it in yourself. And you need someone else to say, you're really good at this and I think you could do this. Or have you heard about this opportunity? I think you should apply. Or I think you have a real knack for this that every other person probably doesn't. And if you chat to this person and that person who kind of work in the space, you could be really good. And I think for some people, the nudge in that right direction is really the first step.
It's the thing that makes a difference.
In terms of shifting things.
And would you say then, for example, your recent fellowship program that you're a part of, Eisenhower, did that be a launch pad for you for your next pivot, essentially?
Eisenhower was absolutely phenomenal. like just in every possible way, mostly because of the people.
Yeah.
Such incredible people. I spoke a little bit before about, the people in your network, but
it took it to the next level.
Yeah, that group of people. I mean, it's so the cohort of Eisenhower Fellows that I was part of was a Pan-African group. So usually they are two types of tracks. So they'll do the Global Fellows, which is people from all over the world, and then they also have kind of regional tracks. So they'll have an African track, they'll have a Eastern European track, etc. So being part of the African track, our cohort was then naturally all African. But people who are doing the most incredible things from different countries, just sort of all with a key or a vested interest in sustainability, which is what, which is something I'm passionate about now. In the context of our current power crisis, which you can't see right now because this room is so well lit, but out there somewhere is a power crisis. And so just really having an opportunity to engage with people who are doing meaningful work, who are critically thinking in this area, but who are also invested in making a difference. There's, I don't know, people who... There's, meeting really talented, really amazing people who are in it to win it and want to climb the corporate ladder as fast as they can and get to the top and kind of occupy positions of power. And that's, you're certainly kind of welcome to own that. We need responsible people in corporate institutions and organizations, and we need responsible millionaires and billionaires. So shout out to all of those aspiring. But we also just need people who have a vested interest in making the world a better place. And so that for me was one of the treasures of being able to be part of the Eisenhower Fellows for that particular cohort. But then it opens up a network of people who have been fellows since like 1960. And fellows from all over the world. So whenever you travel, as an Eisenhower Fellow, you can reach out to people in Ghana and say, hey, I'm in Ghana. Are there any fellows in Accra that want to grab dinner? Or you can, travel as far as Yugoslavia and try and see if you... It's just like absolutely amazing to have those sort of doors opened with people across the world who are all deeply invested in sort of contributing to enriching a better and more prosperous society, and that's been a real treat.
And was that just part of maybe the launch pad that helped you pivot into the nonprofit space? Because we've obviously spoken about your time now in corporate, but you're currently the country partnerships manager for Unicef, which is in the nonprofit space. What was that transition like? What was the pivot into that industry like?
Yeah, it was probably a shock for Eisenhower, because when I applied, I was absolutely still in financial services. And a large part of my kind of application and motivation was around the sort of stuff I was going to do from financial services. And because of COVID, there was this lag between the application period and the start out period. And by the time we started, I'd kind of had to go back to them and say, so I know
I'm no longer there. I just need to update a few details.
And they were incredibly gracious about it, which, allowed me to sort of continue in the fellowship. But I think at the heart of it is that international relations was my first love. So it kind of fell away a little bit when I kind of put all of my energy and all of my focus into the private sector work that I was doing, which I also really, really loved. And deeply enjoyed. I always say that, financial services is my accidental second love. I never anticipated to do it as long as I did. And I also never thought I'd enjoy it as much as I did. And I think it has a lot to do with the people and the culture and the environment and just kind of the opportunities that I was afforded in that space. But after a while, I was in my last role for almost 5 years. And I think probably the 4th year, I started thinking, okay,
what's the next thing?
I have to think about the next thing. Every other role I've done before has sort of been 2 years, And so now I've done this for quite a while. So what would a pivot look like?
Yes.
And, it was during COVID and we all had a lot of time with ourselves and we were all journaling a lot and being deeply reflective. And it sort of took me back to, who did you want to be when this whole career thing started?
Sure.
And what were you really passionate about at the beginning? And, is it possible that, that may still happen? And so I started kind of then thinking a little bit out of the box. I started kind of looking around in the private sector, but also now looking back in the nonprofit space.
Sure.
And so that one conversation led to another conversation, which led to a career transition. So the great thing about, what I do now is that it's still largely uses the skills that I built up in the private sector, because a large part of it is engagement with the private sector, advocacy into the private sector about the work of our organization, and how we can build sort of organizations that are more receptive to family-friendly policies, advocating for how we can use resources in the public and the private sector to create greater access to services for children overall. So the skill set is still there, the network is still there. It's just that I've kind of transitioned industries. I like to laugh and say it's like I'm sitting on the other side of the table. When you're in the private sector, everyone's coming to tell you about these great ideas that you should fund, and it's just you're thinking about it, you're weighing all the options, you're writing all these checks, and now I'm on the other side. I'm like telling people about these great opportunities, exactly, and pitching for all these checks. So it's been a pivot in both directions, and it's wonderful to sit on the other side of the table and sort of put myself in the shoes of all of those people who was previously sitting across the table from me. And sometimes we get together now when we're on different sides of the table, and we're still able to very much keep those engagements and relationships alive. So that's how that kind of came to be. It's always been on the bucket list. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to sort of be doing it now. It'll be 2 years next month. I can't believe,
Sure.
It'll be 2 years in September. So that's how that's gone.
No, that's good. That's good. What you spoke about was just highlighting the transferable skills that you can use in one industry to another. And I think a lot of people really don't know how to position their skill set so that they can identify the value that they can bring through those skills in a different industry. Any tips or pointers for someone who might want to transition to something different, but just doesn't know how to package their current skill set to make it more marketable for something else?
Yeah. I guess as a starting out exercise, I'd say sort of forget about your job, right? Forget about your job title. Forget about, the industry in which you work.
Yeah.
Sit down with yourself, get a blank sheet of paper and just write down the stuff that you're good at, the stuff that you can do. Like, if we were to take you right now and put you on Mars, what are the things that you're absolutely sure that you would be able to do? That's a good indicator of, what your core skill set is. And the things that you're able to do, not because of where you work, but because of what you've kind of been able to develop and what you've been able to refine as a result of some of the work that you've done. And once you've isolated your skills from the industry and from the sector and from the organization, then you kind of have a very good sense of, okay, this is the stuff that I can do. I can project manage, I can sell, I can build, I can design, I can trade. And I think that's then, once you have the skills sort of stripped out of the industry, stripped out of the job titles, stripped out of the sector, you can then think about how to reposition those or to repackage those for a different industry, because at the core of it, you're the package, right? You're selling your skills, and you're just looking for someone who's able to kind of be a fit for what you have and how you can sell that.
Yeah, that's like developing your own value proposition.
Exactly.
Exactly. Developing your own value proposition that you can really just take to any market. But it does take a degree of understanding what your strengths are and a level of self-awareness to be able to match that to your desired next 100%. Move or next role. So as a leader in your field, how are you leading? How do you lead? And how do you think the way that you lead is making a difference?
Always the biggest and hardest questions at the end. So, I think in the beginning we spoke a little bit about my mom. And she is still, for me, one of the most inspirational leaders I've had the privilege of being able to follow. But it then kind of goes back to saying that you're only leading if you actually have inspired other people to, to sort of follow in the path that you're creating. Sometimes we like to think that we're leading when we're actually managing. And I think, that's something we always need to be very aware of. That's something we always need to test. Given half a chance, if the people that you're saying that you're leading would opt out, because they're actually being managed, then there's something there that we need to sort of be mindful of. You don't need a title to be a leader. You don't need an enormous office or a humongous salary. You need to have the kind of vision and the kind of character and the kind of people posture that people can actually buy into and that people can actually sort of get behind. I think without buy-in, we really struggle to say that we have people who are leaders. We don't have a shortage of positions on the continent. We don't have a shortage of powerful people, but we often complain that we don't have the sort of leadership that we would like to see. And I think essentially what people are saying is we see these people, but we're not sure that we want to follow them. And I think that's the difficult conversation that one has to have with oneself in defining what a leadership style, what a leadership journey looks like, is to really reflect on, yes, you do the work on self, but what's the impact that it has on people? Because to the extent that there are no people, is there how do we measure the value of what's happening on self if we can't sort of tell what that impact is on people? So again, very real, very authentic in terms of style, and just kind of showing up as a person first. For me, it's about how we can all bring our collective strengths, our collective assets, and our collective responsibilities together in order to make a difference. And I try by all means to sort of bring that into the workplace, but also bring that into sort of, my community, bring that into the space of young people that I work with and get to mentor. I'm always looking to learn from them, they have so much insight, they have so much knowledge that they're willing to share. And I think when we sit down together and we converse and we have an opportunity to really have those discussions, we're both able to sort of influence one another in positive directions. And I think in certain ways they're leading me, and in certain ways I hope that I'm leading them. And so it's always wonderful to be able to sort of get that kind of feedback. Just this morning, a friend of mine sent me a text to say someone who listened to our career podcast in 2021 wrote to her and said, I've never forgotten these sort of 3 things that you've said. And they're kind of like, I've made them the tenets of kind of my career journey. And that's the sort of stuff that for me is inspiring. Being able to, without hubris or without sort of having a ticket that says I figured it all out, to share what you've kind of gained in your work, in your journey, in your space, in such a way that it's meaningful and helpful and inspirational to others.
And on the note of sharing what you've gained throughout your journey, what podcast, video, book, or article have you read or listened to recently that's just changed your perspective about the world of work?
Yeah, I'm terrible with books because if I like a book, I'll read it again and again.
And you don't want to read anything else.
So that thing is, I always have to read something once. And then if I like it, I'll probably read it again and again. So I haven't kind of picked up. There's also another quote that I like, which says, buying books and reading books are 2 completely different hobbies. And you can have both. But, sometimes it's not that, you buy and read everything. So I buy way in advance. And then I sort of get to reading them sort of as I move along. So current list of favorites, which is probably newer than most, is Take Charge
Yes, by Nyampini
Mabunda. Absolutely phenomenal read. Love his career story. Such a humble, such a down-to-earth, such a provocative leader. I had the privilege of attending one of his kind of roundtable discussions at Vida Cafe in Douglasdale a couple of months ago. What a solid human being, right?
Definitely
like before being the CEO of General Electric and all of these other amazing things that he's done, just such a great person. So absolutely loved Take Charge. On repeat is Boardroom Dancing by Nolita Fagude.
Okay.
So absolutely.
Haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, came out actually during COVID, and so we got very well acquainted during sort of the 2019-2020, and it's on my nightstand at the moment, so I read that quite a bit. Lean In,
of course,
standard, right?
All time favorite.
Exactly, got a little copy that like kind of fits everywhere. And Becoming by Michelle Obama,
of
also
course,
really cool staple and standard that I enjoy. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Never get enough. Never get enough. Like, can never
That's
get
a long
enough.
list. That's a long list.
So those are just some of my kind of favorites, but you know, stuff that you'll find kind of on my nightstand in the car sort of at the moment.
And just in the spirit of the podcast, what does wellness in the workplace mean to you?
Wanting to go to work.
Wanting to go to work. Sure.
You know, not having those Sunday night anxieties about what am I going to do tomorrow morning, or where can I go tomorrow morning that's not the office. I think that the fundamental starting point of wellness is actually wanting to be there, wanting to show up, wanting to invest, and wanting to make a difference. And as soon as that desire starts to lag, I think for the first kind of question one needs to start asking for me is around wellness. What's shifted? What's changed? Is it a you change? Is it a culture change? Is it something in your personal life? How can you sort of address that shift? But really wanting to be there, enjoying being there, and wanting to make a contribution, I think for me is the key essence of wellness in the workplace.
Sure, I love that. And just in closing, do you have any closing remarks or comments about our topic, career pivoting, transitioning, career mapping? What do you have for us?
Closing remarks is really just kudos and shout out to you for creating this platform. I think it's incredibly important, as Viola Davis and others say, to see a physical representation of you, or a physical manifestation of you in the spaces that you want to go into. As a child, kind of growing up, seeing their active female professionals sort of leading our family was very informative for me, but also then kind of going into university and seeing the very strong sort of women mentors that we had who were doing incredible and amazing things and sort of giving back and showing us that it was possible to do those things. And I think that's exactly what conversations like this do. They help people to see what is possible for them, because people like them have done those things, or people like them have taken on those opportunities. It demystifies things that seem far away and makes them a lot more tangible. And I think the topic of wellness is particularly important because, you know, there's this perception that you just, you know, we're just slogging, you know, we're all suffering, let's just suffer together. And that's not true. There is real wellness to be obtained. There's real balance to be obtained. There's real value to be mined. And you don't have to feel like you're just making it or just getting by every single time. And I think when people share their stories of how they've transitioned, of how they've pivoted, of how they've grown, it can inspire so many other people to pursue those things for themselves as well. So keep doing this great work.
Thank you.
And such a privilege to be here today.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight. Just also thank you for the openness about your journey, and I think it is important to have just that level of vulnerability in sharing our stories in order for it to seem or be more accessible and tangible for those that are listening and watching. And if you are watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in yet again. This was another installment of My Career Story right here on Wellness in the Workplace. You can catch our podcast on all major podcast streaming services, catch up on all the past episodes. You can also find us on YouTube to have more of a viewing experience. My name is Mandisa Mathobela, and this is Wellness in the Workplace. I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye-bye.